This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com with my weekly review of Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. One correction from yesterday's daily news update. I was talking about Nia Jax and I accidentally called her Nyla Rose. So sorry about that mistake. So I'll get into it with the WWE news. Vince McMahon's brother, Rod McMahon, passed away on January the 20th at the age of 77. He was Vince's older brother. He lived in Willis, Texas. He grew up with Vince and Vince's mother. Vince's mother is still alive, according to Dave Meltzer, lives in North Carolina and is somewhere around 100 years old. I guess Vince missed the tapings this week because he was with his family in Texas, I guess. I've reported on this already about The Undertaker calling today's WWE wrestler soft and saying he doesn't watch the product anymore. According to the Observer, Goldberg agreed with The Undertaker, saying, quote, "Yes, I believe comparatively the business is soft as compared to the 90s, but the business is 2021, so things have changed and things have to be different. Superstars that were bigger than life existed, but it's hard in this generation to build those people. I mean, like I said, times are quite different than they were back in the day, but people are soft. People take offense to things way too quickly. I mean, grow a little thicker skin, boys and girls. That's all I can say," end quote. So Goldberg agrees with The Undertaker. Jazz, two-time women's champion, also agreed with The Undertaker. I had her on the Inside SWE Fury podcast, which airs Tuesday nights at 9. Legendary referee James Beard and I host that. And James Beard also agreed with The Undertaker. And James is the first, and it might be one of the very few American referees to be regularly used in Japan. He was that good. And now he's a matchmaker for SWE Fury. So I already commented on it. I also agree that the wrestlers are soft, and I don't think that's going to change in the WWE. It's a very corporate environment, and they don't want troublemakers. They're not hiring people like Roddy Piper and Ric Flair anymore, the characters that everyone loved. Terry Funk. None of these guys would have lasted because WWE would have got rid of them if they were in today's company acting like they did back in the 80s. Ric Flair coming out of an airplane bathroom in his robe and flashing stewardesses, for instance. That's happened many times. It's been well documented. Now, if that happened, he would be fired. And it's just the way things have changed, but also those characters just don't exist. I guess Brock Lesnar would be the last real character I can think of that is interesting in real life and kind of transcended wrestling in that way. John Cena got over, and he's really popular, but he's not really as over as like Hulk Hogan was. But John Cena was definitely over. He was the last mega star. I guess the biggest star they probably have right now, other than Goldberg, who is part-time, would be Roman Reigns, who is not at the level that Cena and Brock Lesnar are as far as mainstream people knowing who he is. But he's probably the best of the newer crop that he's got. And keep in mind, he came from FCW. He didn't come from the Performance Center. There hasn't been one wrestler that was trained out of the Performance Center that's become a huge star. Not a single one. So that tells you something else scary about the future for them, that the way that they're training people and hiring people right now are not future megastars. The WWE, on a good note for them, but probably a bad note for the fans because it puts less pressure on them to create good content. On January 25th, it was announced that the WWE Network has now become part of NBC's Peacock Network, who purchased the U.S. rights to the WWE Network, paying them over $200 million a year for 5 years. Now, keep in mind, prior to this, WWE has only been generating about $132 million in the U.S. related to the network. So now they don't have to run their own network. It's less responsibility. And they're making $200 million and don't need to worry about less people buying the network every year because they're getting a huge amount of money every year. It's going to be worth over $1 billion in 5 years. So they are good business people. You can't take that away from WWE. Meltzer even noted in The Observer that this does not guarantee that WWE's popularity or audience is going to grow over this time, but it now guarantees them with their other TV deals $670 million a year from the U.S. marketplace alone. This does not include international deals, non-TV streaming deals, such as merchandising, licensing, or live event revenue. So it's very good for the WWE's finances. The stock has already gone up a bit. As I said previously, I made the mistake of getting some when they got that Fox deal because everyone thought that was for such huge money the stock would actually go up, but it actually is not. It has not reached the amount I bought it for since the Fox deal. So I'm hoping it goes back up with this deal so I can dump the shares that I bought. Apparently, some business insiders think that this deal with NBC might see something like NBC actually buying WWE in 2026 when this 5-year network deal ends. Because by that time, if Vince is still alive, he'll be 81. We just saw his brother died at 77. So if Vince makes it to 81, he will, I don't know, he might be less motivated to keep WWE going and might take a buyout. Who knows? Time will only tell on that. For the Royal Rumble this year, Meltzer points out that it's the least promoted Royal Rumble in the 34-year history of WWE presenting the Royal Rumble. Some of the reasons for this is they don't do pay-per-views anymore, or they do them, but it's not a big factor. You can still buy any of these pay-per-views on pay-per-views, but most people watch on the network. So it really doesn't matter if more people watch because they get the same amount of money. But yeah, there's not much making anyone want to tune into the Royal Rumble. WWE ran a special this week on January 26th from Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, where they tape Raw and SmackDown, for their Indian market, where apparently they mixed in a bunch of Indian wrestlers. They've been training with some of WWE's best in-ring performers to try and carry them, make them look good. Apparently, most of them came off as very green, according to Meltzer. And he points out in particular, there was a guy named Rama that he doesn't feel they should be pushing because he's already 40. He's been in the WWE system for 6 years, and he looked completely green in his match against AJ Styles on this show. Meltzer also pointed out that the Raka King shows in India that Jeff Jarrett put on 10 years ago were much better events than this pay-per-view. I do vaguely remember that. I know Scott Steiner was involved with those shows in India, and I believe the Singh brothers were on those cards as well. AEW did a 0.29 rating this week with Sting on the card, which shows you that people are caring less and less about Sting. NXT did a 0.21. Impact, which featured appearances from Kenny Omega and Matt Hardy, did a 0.05. So I guess Impact was very happy with that number. 0.05 is very good for Impact, I guess. Raw did a 0.52. SmackDown did a 0.63. The Steve Austin show after Raw did a 0.22. By the way, somebody who knows that I've interviewed a lot of people about Bill Kazmaier sent me a clip earlier this week of Bill Kazmaier challenging Steve Austin, which I tweeted to Steve Austin, and Steve Austin replied, "Shitty promo," and over 30,000 people saw that video because Austin replied to it. Kazmaier was not well liked by the wrestlers, as Ted Arcidi talked about. And Ross Hart, in the interview I did with Ross Hart this week, one of the Hart brothers who was a producer for Stampede Wrestling, also went into detail about the heat that Kazmaier had with Brian Pillman, who of course was buddies with Steve Austin, which probably was one of the reasons, among others, why Austin might not have liked Kazmaier. In other wrestling news, the Disney Channel picked up a show called Ultraviolet and the Blue Demon, involving the Blue Demon Jr., who is a Mexican wrestling star. I actually have an interview with him on the Hannibal TV if you search Blue Demon Jr., the Hannibal TV. So that's great for him if he's involved in a Disney show. That's going to make him some nice coin. SWE has announced Trevor Murdoch is going to be part of their big February 27th show in Carthage, Texas, along with Terry Funk and a ton of other stars are going to be there. And then next Saturday, February 6th, in Irving, Texas, just outside of Dallas, there's a huge show happening with SWE Fury, featuring Mark Henry, Teddy Long, the Bloodhunter, Selena De La Renta, Charlie Haas, Tim Storm, champion of the females, Christy Janes, Rodney Mack, Amber Nova, just a packed star card full of stars. And the SWE TV show now airs every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on the Hannibal TV. And it's also on in about 35 million homes across the U.S. through various syndication networks. Great company. And starting next week, the new television shows begin. They have from the era of the new producer. And in this new era, they also upped their star power a lot. So next Tuesday at 8 p.m., get ready for the tapings that started in Greenville, Texas. And again, the next tapings, February 6th in Irving, February 27th in Carthage, then March 20th, they're going to be in Canton, Texas. The scheduled Alberto Del Rio trial, he's also known as Alberto El Patron. This is related to 4 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of aggravated kidnapping, and what was described as a brutal incident that occurred on May 3rd, 2020, was pushed from January 25th to May 3rd. even though the woman has changed her story related to this, I guess they're still moving forward with the trial. And it is relevant to note that Paige has also gone on the record saying that there was physical abuse in her relationship with Alberto, which Alberto has denied. Sean Waltman, X-Pac, now 48, underwent surgery to repair a torn ACL, MCL, and meniscus on January 26th. He's been having knee problems for over a decade between that and Hep C, which he recently recovered from. That's why he retired. But he says once his knee is fixed up, he's going to try and have one last run. Chicky Star, who I have wrestled and defeated back in my time in WWC Puerto Rico. He's 62. Some sad news about him. He was in intensive care. He still is in intensive care related to some complications due to a recent surgery that he had. So wish him a good recovery on that. In the UFC news, Conor McGregor has 4 fights left on his UFC contract. A lot of people think he's going to fight Nate Diaz next. Time will tell. Related to UFC 257, where he lost via knockout in the second round to Poirier, it did 1,600,000 buys, which would make it the second biggest UFC pay-per-view in history, behind McGregor versus Khabib, which took place in 2018 and did 2.35 million buys. So that's a great number. And I do believe McGregor also had the highest pay-per-view buys of last year as well for his fight against Cowboy Cerrone, which I don't even think went 30 seconds. The preliminaries of UFC 257 did a 0.54 rating. There was 2,000 fans in the building in Abu Dhabi. So again, for the people that say that think that UFC does just crazy better TV ratings than wrestling, as we see here, the prelims did a 0.54 rating. So SmackDown did a 0.63 last week. So SmackDown actually got a better rating than the UFC 257 prelims. But as far as pay-per-view buys, there's absolutely no comparison. UFC just blows wrestling away. And again, that's not just because people have more network, like buy the network now instead of buying pay-per-views, although they still can buy pay-per-views. It's just there's way less interest in wrestling. Maybe because the wrestlers are soft, as the Undertaker says, and also the content is just, I honestly don't know how people can still watch it. It's so bad. I can't even sit through the 3-minute highlights without skipping through. I mean, as much as I like Ric Flair, I tried to watch the full SmackDown highlights from last week, where he's doing an angle where he's, I guess, with this woman, Lacey Evans, beautiful lady, and she's beating up Charlotte Flair in front of Rick, and Rick is like celebrating. It's just so well documented that Rick and Charlotte are close that I just can't buy into that angle at all, because we know they're close. And it's so unbelievable. Like, one of the things about wrestling these days is it's not believable. And it's not just the in-ring product with the stupid leg slapping and millions of people trying to catch people that are doing dives and fake-looking choreographed spots. It's, even if they do something believable, there's dweebs like Drew McDonald that go into the newspaper the next day and talk about storylines, or people like Sami Zayn. They said, well, that was a good match, but you really have to give the credit to the producer of the match, Jamie Noble. He had such a big role in it, which was a quote from Sami Zayn. It's like, they don't sell the angles. They don't have to sell because everyone just gets money no matter what these days. It's not based on what you can draw anymore. And now with WWE getting $1 billion deal, it's going to be even worse. Because keep in mind, there's very little pay-per-view bonuses anymore due to so few people buying pay-per-view. So there's less motivation for the wrestlers to try and sell pay-per-views. Could you imagine if Hogan and Macho Man after WrestleMania 5, if Macho Man had gone to a newspaper reporter and said, well, you really got to give the credit of that match to Pat Patterson. He put the match together. You just wouldn't see it happen. And it's part of the reason why wrestling is so bad now. People have always known it's fake. They just was a greater respect for the business and protecting angles. But that's not going to change in WWE. We can only hope that companies like SWE Fury are going to create better options as WWE continues to get more and more corporate. Back to UFC news. More sad news related to BJ Penn, who, if they ever do a dark side of MMA, I think he'd be one of the leading contenders to be on dark side of MMA. At 42, he was arrested again January 23rd on DUI charges. He was arrested at 4:51 p.m. when cops responded to a report of reckless driving on a business property. The police, upon arrival, were told that Penn had left and was talking loudly to employees at a nearby business, and he drove off in a reckless manner. Penn then returned, and the officers saw signs of impairment, arrested him, and he's since been released pending further investigations. Somebody recorded Penn while he was being arrested, I guess, screaming explicitives. So if you guys remember, it wasn't too long ago that Penn lost out on a big money UFC fight, that this was also due to his alcohol abuse issues. So hopefully he gets some help. In other MMA news, Jake Paul is going to face Ben Askren in an 8-round boxing match on April the 17th. Now, Ben Askren isn't one of the more famous MMA fighters. I've done an interview with him. I like him. But, for instance, I don't even think that interview has 5,000 hits. Jake Paul is a huge celebrity on social media. Huge, massive following. Ben Askren isn't a big boxer. He was known as a wrestler. But it'll be interesting. I would have thought that Jake Paul would have held out for a more of a name fighter, because if he loses to Ben Askren, I don't know. I think he should have held out for a bigger name fighter or fought another popular social media guy. Jake Paul is bigger than Ben Askren, so that'll be interesting. I'm sure it's going to do a great buy rate. He was part of the Mike Tyson Roy Jones Jr. undercard, which had the second biggest buy rate of 2020, where he got an impressive first round knockout. I'm sure he's not going to knock out Askren that easily. I'll get into some of your questions. John Falsetta tips me $2 and says nobody wants storytelling and unathletic nerds. They do have some unathletic looking guys like Kevin Owens, for instance. Not only does he not look like an athlete, he just looks like a Wendy's fry employee that's left the fry fryer, thrown on some basketball shorts and a cutoff t-shirt, and stepped in the ring. That turns people off. Some smart marks might like him because he looks like a lot of the smart marks, and they like the idea that someone that doesn't look very athletic is winning titles. But to jocks and regular people, they just look at that and say, hey, look how fake wrestling is. There's a guy dressed in street clothes that's fat is main eventing. No wonder I'm just going to keep flipping the channels. They do have a lot of small wrestlers that are good athletes, but they do more of a gymnastics, choreographed looking performance that doesn't even resemble a fight. So I don't find it interesting. Geraldo says that Devon Dudley says wrestlers nowadays are rude and disrespectful. I did read that today. And I hope Devon's health issues are getting better. I definitely hope so. Malik, how do I go about getting wrestlers to be interviewed with me? Well, I have been in the wrestling business since 2001 as a wrestler, and I've been a promoter in wrestling since like 2004. So it's safe to say I've made some contact over the years. Rick Brooks tips me $2. Thank you, Rick. Says Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer was wrestling. Speaking of the lovely people that tip me, and Mad Dog was a man's man. He's a nut job. One of the crazy characters in wrestling. I do have 2 members-only interviews tomorrow. One at, I think it's at 6:30 with Tommy Rich, and one at 10:30 with Scott Flash Norton. Scott is a man, another guy that's a man's man, and Scott wasn't a drug user, but there's a guy that you wouldn't want to mess with. There's a guy that, like, if you're walking down the street at 3 a.m, you're gonna go to the other side of the street. There's not too many wrestlers today that'll make you do that. Certainly not Drew McDonald in his skirt. It's not gonna scare anyone. And yes, he did once come out with a sword, but he was quick to say the next day that wasn't his sword. It's actually Vince McMahon's sword. He doesn't actually own a sword. Loves killing any momentum he has. That guy. I'd love to fight him. I'd actually dismantle that guy in a fight very easily. Double S says Norton was a legit badass. Mike F says more lockdowns coming. Well, we're already in an extreme lockdown here in Ontario, and literally almost on a daily basis, they're adding more rules. It's a real miserable place to live right now in Canada. Rick Brooks just became a member. Thank you, Rick Brooks, for your $1.99 a month support. If I eventually get more and more members, I think you're number 56, Rick. But imagine if I had 5,000, all the interviews I could get, because really the only thing limiting my interviews is finances. I don't have millions of dollars to throw around. I'm not like Tony Khan, the son of a billionaire. As Mike D welcomes Rick. Mike, I hope you liked it. Piper appeared yesterday with her godmother, Teal Piper, in my interview with Teal Piper. Geraldo says, hope things get better. Well, I'm doing. I don't have much to complain about, thankfully, thanks to YouTube. There's people a lot worse off than me, but I don't like not having freedom. I really don't like it. And it seems like a lot of these rules are being made based on no research, little to no research, and little to no evidence. Anyways, I don't want to go on a tirade of that. I'll see all you guys tomorrow when I interview Tommy Rich and Scott Norton. I wish you all a good weekend. Bill, the $1 Million Man, Bill himself, one of our great members, has tipped $20. Thank you, Bill. I'm still working on that Tessa Blanchard interview, by the way. Hopefully it happens sooner than later. I would love to get it.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support